picture the scenario, right? You spend months, maybe even years, just praying and hustling for this massive opportunity.
Oh, yeah. Like a huge promotion. Or maybe finally getting a seat on the executive board.
Exactly. Or, the chance to launch your own venture.
Yeah.
You map out the entire strategy, you put in the late nights, and you practically beg for this new level of responsibility.
And you build this whole narrative around how your life and your career are finally going to click into place the very second that specific door opens.
Right. But then the email comes through, the offer is made, the keys are handed over to you, and the second you actually sit in the big chair, that triumphant wave of overwhelming confidence you were expecting just never arrives.
Yeah, not even a little bit. Instead, you're just hit with this suffocating, visceral wave of panic.
I mean, you literally look around the boardroom completely convinced that, like, at any second, security is going to tap you on the shoulder and escort you out because obviously they've realized some terrible administrative error has occurred.
It's a profound psychological whiplash, Externally, the metrics, your resume, your peers, they're all validating your competence.
Right.
But internally, you just feel like an actor who totally forgot to memorize the script, and you're just waiting for the house lights to come on.
And that jarring tension is exactly what we are dissecting in our deep dive today. We're pulling from this incredibly insightful set of sources, an article and some video teachings by Dennis Amagori from DennisMotivates.com.
Yeah, and he specifically focuses on this concept of imposter syndrome in the kingdom.
Exactly. So our mission here is to trace a really fascinating progression. We want to see how ancient leadership texts actually offer this, well, surprisingly modern blueprint for moving out of that paralyzing hesitation and stepping into bold stewardship.
Because, the term imposter syndrome, it feels like a very modern Silicon Valley kind of invention, right?
Totally.
Like a buzzword. Yeah. Modern psychology defines it as this persistent inability to believe your success is deserved. Like you didn't legitimately achieve it through your own skills. We treat it like it's just a byproduct of modern corporate culture.
But the sources highlight that this internal crisis is actually one of the oldest, most universal leadership struggles recorded in human history, which brings us to the ultimate case study in the material, Moses at the burning bush.
Oh, this is such a classic example. And we really need to frame the sheer scale of what is happening here. God hands Moses what is arguably the most daunting executive mandate ever conceived.
Yeah, just a small task. Extract an entire enslaved nation from the grip of a global superpower, no big deal.
Right. And Moses does not respond with, visionary enthusiasm. His immediate reaction in Exodus 3.1 is this hyper-focused, super defensive question. He just says, "Who am I?"
Which is the classic imposter syndrome response.
Exactly. He essentially demands a full audit of his own qualifications.
Yeah.
He looks at this massive external calling and immediately cross-references it against his internal, deeply flawed resume.
Right, because he sees a fugitive who ran away from Egypt 40 years prior. He highlights his lack of eloquence, heavily implying he isn't some charismatic public speaker. So he thinks he's entirely the wrong candidate for a diplomatic mission of this magnitude.
It's so relatable.
It really is. The psychology of that reaction is so telling. Because when confronted with a massive assignment, highly capable professionals today do the exact same thing.
Oh, 100%.
They don't look at the opportunity. They pull out a mental spreadsheet and begin rigorously detailing their own limitations. It's like finally being handed the keys to a high-performance sports car, but feeling like you only have a learner's permit.
That is a perfect analogy. You're terrified you're going to crash it immediately.
Right. So I have to ask you, why do high-achieving people instinctively audit their own flaws the moment they get exactly what they asked for?
Well, it really comes down to how high achievers process the concept of readiness. People who are highly analytical possess a very acute threat detection system. Because they understand exactly what complex success requires, they are hyper-aware of the delta, the gap between their current present-day skill set and the future demands of this massive new role.
And so they see exactly where they fall short.
Right. They miscalculate where the burden of success actually lies. They basically operate under the assumption that they must be a fully finished, perfectly polished product on day one. And if they aren't, they have no right to hold the position.
Wow. So it's a fundamental misunderstanding of how capacity works. They're measuring their day one skills against a day 100 problem.
Exactly.
Which makes the turning point in the Moses narrative so fascinating to me. Because when Moses lays out this comprehensive spreadsheet of his flaws and his failures, God's response completely ignores the audit.
There is zero motivational pep talk.
Right. No, Moses, you have incredible untapped potential. God simply replies in Exodus 3.1, I will be with you.
And that singular phrase dismantles the entire framework of modern self-confidence.
Hmm.
Because self-confidence, by its very definition, is an internal loop. It constantly asks, do I have the skills? Am I smart enough? Am I perfectly ready for this?
It forces you to rely entirely on your own isolated abilities.
Yeah. But the source material argues for a paradigm shift toward God confidence. And that fundamentally alters the anchor. It moves the defining question from, am I ready, to, is God with me?
So it posits that a true calling is not validated by the presence of your perfectly honed skills, but by the presence of the one who issued the call.
Precisely.
Okay, I need to play devil's advocate here for a second, because translating that ancient theological concept into a modern corporate environment sounds, well, it sounds incredibly risky.
Yeah, so
Well, if I walk into a role as a chief financial officer, but I secretly have absolutely no idea how to restructure a P&L statement, simply telling myself God is with me sounds like a recipe for dangerous incompetence. Does this mean our actual professional skills don't matter? Or is this just about changing where we anchor our trust when the stakes are high?
I'm really glad you brought that up, because that is the critical distinction we have to make here. The text isn't suggesting that skills are irrelevant, or that incompetence is suddenly holy.
Right. That wouldn't end well for anyone.
No, not at all. What it's addressing is the psychological paralysis of the high achiever. Think about the cognitive load of imposter syndrome, when you believe the entire weight of a massive assignment rests solely on your current imperfect abilities. Your cortisol spikes.
You just freeze. You want to hide.
Exactly. Shifting the anchor to divine presence, or, in a broader psychological sense, shifting from a performance goal where you have to prove you're flawless to a learning goal where you trust you'll be equipped as you go, that lowers the cognitive load.
Oh, I see.
It removes the paralyzing pressure to be perfect, which, ironically, is the exact biological state you need to be in to actually absorb new skills and perform at a high level.
So it's not about bypassing the need for skills at all. It's about altering the environment in which those skills are acquired. You are taking that crushing weight off your own shoulders so you can actually do the work of learning.
Yes, precisely. And this leads us to a core logistical concept in the sources, championed by the leadership expert John Maxwell. He says leadership expands as leaders grow in capacity.
But the mechanism of that growth is what trips people up, right?
Exactly. That capacity does not generate in a vacuum. It is not built while you sit safely on the sidelines reading manuals and waiting for some elusive feeling of perfect readiness to suddenly wash over you.
To use a biological analogy, it sounds exactly like muscle hypertrophy. You don't naturally develop the muscle mass required to lift a heavy weight before you ever attempt to lift it.
Ooh, that's a great point.
Right. The act of attempting to lift the weight, the friction, the struggle, the micro tears in the tissue that occur during the exercise, that is the biological requirement for the body to build new capacity. The assignment itself is the resistance training.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. Preparation occurs dynamically during the process of obedience. The assignment grows you as you steward it. Readiness isn't the prerequisite for stepping into the calling. Readiness is the result of answering the call.
Wow.
And when you look back at the ancient texts, this pattern is just glaringly obvious. Look at David. His immense courage and strategic mind weren't formulated in some pristine royal military academy.
No, they were forged in total obscurity out in the wilderness, fighting off predators while tending sheep, long before he ever faced a giant.
Exactly. Or Peter. His entire leadership journey seems to be built on a foundation of publicly stumbling, completely misreading situations, and learning through the intense friction of walking directly with Jesus.
Yeah, and even Paul's massive influence was forged in the crucible of shipwrecks, prisons, and intense refinement. God just doesn't seem interested in waiting for polished candidates.
He invites them to grow while they are in motion. The problem is, the modern workplace really struggles with this because hindsight creates this illusion of flawless execution.
That is so true. We look at successful innovators or CEOs, and we only see the polished present. We assume they always possess that level of competence, and then we judge our messy beginnings against their refined endpoints.
Right. And the sources ground this in a really relatable modern anecdote about the reluctant teacher.
Oh, I loved this story.
Yeah, so this is about a woman who felt a distinct calling to lead a Bible study in her local community. She was deeply passionate about the material, but imposter syndrome had her completely gridlocked.
Her internal monologue was just a catastrophic loop. What if I fail completely? What if someone asks a theological question I can't answer? What if they realize I have no formal training?
She was totally stuck in that performance goal mindset we talked about. She was waiting for the feeling of total mastery before she would take even a single step.
And she delayed for a long time, until a mentor finally confronted her with a really piercing question. He asked, "Are you trusting your ability or God's calling?"
And that simple question acted as a circuit breaker. It highlighted the arrogance hidden in her fear, the idea that she alone had to be the source of all wisdom.
Which sparked a reluctant yes. She took action. She started the group. It wasn't perfectly polished, obviously, but the friction of actually doing it built her capacity. The group flourished, the conversations deepened, and years later, several people from that original room went on to lead their own groups.
All of that cascading impact, that massive ripple effect of leadership, was just trapped behind her demand for personal readiness. She had to learn that you only grow inside the assignment.
It's like building the airplane while flying it. But in this case, you have a master engineer as your co-pilot. So how do we silence the modern workplace demand for perfection before action and embrace this messy process of growing on the job?
Well, the sources lay out a specific, actionable progression to move from that state of imposter syndrome into bold stewardship. Let's bring this all the way down to the daily routine of the listener who is sitting at their desk right now, feeling totally out of their depth.
Yes, let's get practical.
The first necessary step is a total reframing of your identity in that space. The text makes a brilliant semantic distinction here. An imposter is a fraud. An imposter is someone who snuck through the back door, deceived everyone, and intrinsically does not belong in the room. But you are not an imposter. You are a steward.
A steward is fundamentally different because a steward doesn't own the asset. If I'm an imposter, my presence relies on my own intrinsic worth and my ability to maintain a deception. But if I'm a steward, I have been explicitly handed the keys by the owner to manage something on their behalf.
Right. The pressure of ownership is completely removed. You just have to manage what is in your hands faithfully.
I love that.
So once you adopt the identity of a steward, the source outlines a three-part coaching challenge to practice this God confidence in your daily tasks. Step one is straightforward, but difficult. Name it.
Name the theme.
Exactly. You must honestly and specifically identify the exact area, project, or opportunity where you are doubting your calling. You cannot fight a vague, hovering cloud of general anxiety. You have to isolate this specific assignment that is triggering your inadequacy.
Because precision destroys the illusion. If you just feel generally overwhelmed, your brain treats everything as a threat. But if you isolate it to, "I am terrified of presenting this quarterly review to the board," you suddenly have a tangible target.
Which perfectly sets up step two, requiring deep introspection. Unmask the fear. You have to ask yourself a very uncomfortable question. What fear is currently disguising itself as humility?
Oh, we really need to unpack that phrase, fear wearing a humility costume. It is an incredibly perceptive call out of human behavior.
Isn't it?
For the listeners sitting at their desk right now, how can they catch themselves in the act when they use false humility as an excuse to hide? Like, how often do we sit in a meeting, an opportunity is presented, and we say, "Oh, I'm just not ready for that yet. I'm still learning. Let someone more experienced handle it."
Yeah, and internally, we pat ourselves on the back for being so grounded and humble.
Exactly. But the text argues that "I'm just not ready" is very often a self-preservation tactic.
It is a brilliant psychological defense mechanism. True humility is acknowledging your limitations, recognizing you don't have all the answers, but still stepping forward in faith, willing to be taught.
Right.
False humility weaponizes those limitations as an excuse to retreat into a zone of safety. It allows you to avoid the vulnerability of trying and potentially failing while still looking socially acceptable.
It's cowardice with good PR.
Huh. That is a stark way to put it. But yes, it really is. You have to audit the outcome of your humility. If your feeling of inadequacy leads you to ask questions, seek mentorship, collaborate, and step forward while asking for help, that is genuine humility.
And if it doesn't?
If your inadequacy results in stagnation, avoiding difficult assignments, and burying your talents out of sight, it is purely fear of failure.
Okay, so if I've unmasked that fear and I realize my humility is actually just a desperate attempt to protect my ego from looking stupid, sitting at my desk dwelling on that realization doesn't solve the problem. In fact, it probably just creates a new anxiety loop.
Oh, definitely. There has to be a physical mechanism to break the cycle.
And that physical mechanism is step 3. Take action.
Hmm.
You need to identify and execute one small, faithful step of obedience today.
You don't have to conquer the entire mountain, and you don't have to have a comprehensive 5-year plan. You just need to create forward momentum.
It's about introducing that friction we talked about earlier. Just draft the proposal, send the email to the mentor, schedule the kickoff meeting. The scale of the action doesn't matter, the direction does.
Right, because it forces the brain out of the theoretical loop of anxiety and into the practical reality of execution. And to sustain that momentum, the sources provide a tool to rewire the internal monologue, a set of daily affirmations to actively replace self-doubt with God confidence.
Oh, yes, the text suggests speaking this aloud, right? Because that engages a different part of the brain than just thinking it.
Exactly. The affirmation is, God has called me for this season, and his presence equips me. I grow in wisdom, courage, and leadership as I walk in obedience.
I grow in wisdom, courage, and leadership as I walk in obedience. Notice the sequence there. The growth happens as you walk. The goal of all of this, the mindset shift, the unmasking of fear, the micro actions, isn't to magically eradicate your self-awareness or turn you into an arrogant leader who thinks they know everything.
No, not at all.
The goal is simply to remove the hesitation that actively contradicts the assignment. It's about getting out of your own way.
Synthesizing the entire progression we've tracked today, the ultimate revelation is remarkably freeing. You do not have to feel ready to be faithful. Faithfulness is the objective metric. Readiness is subjective. When you prioritize faithfulness over feeling prepared, your confidence becomes a byproduct. It grows organically as a direct result of your action, not as a prerequisite for it.
We started this deep dive exploring that gut-wrenching moment. You finally get the keys to the massive opportunity, you sit in the big chair, and you are terrified you don't belong. But the ancient blueprint we've unpacked today completely neutralizes that terror.
Yeah, you aren't a fraud waiting to be exposed. You are a steward who was purposefully called into the room to learn on the job.
The burden of infinite perfection is lifted, and it's replaced by the requirement of daily, faithful action. So as we wrap up, I want you to consider a completely different angle on this. We spent this entire time talking about how your hesitation impacts you, your anxiety, your imposter syndrome, your growth.
Right.
But think about that massive opportunity you are currently finding excuses to avoid. If readiness is truly the reward for taking the step and not the requirement for starting, who else is paying the price for your delay?
That's a heavy thought.
What if the people relying on your future leadership, the team waiting for your vision, or the community needing your voice are currently stranded just because you were too busy tending to your false humility to finally step into the arena? The cost of your hesitation isn't just your own growth, it's the progress of everyone waiting on the other side of your obedience.